Yeah, they're still going.
I really want to play the Star Wars Cantina theme, but since I throw this up on YouTube, I don't know if YouTube will be like, no,
Yeah.
copyrighted material. I will play this for you guys though. That's a terrible sample though. All right, here we go.
Good evening, fellow rebels, and welcome to the Rebels Cast UK. I'm Alistair Kennedy, and here with me tonight is Ross Shaw and Yogi, aka Yomar Lopez. Tonight on the show, we are going to be discussing Out of Darkness, and we're also going to be discussing the novel by John Miller, which was A New Dawn, which is an awesome read and sets up the show. But Ross, did you have any Star Wars news before we go ahead?
Not that I know of. I've just the usual storyboard stuff, which, in all honesty, like I think there's only so much you can talk about storyboard, and everyone should know by now that you can't rely on information that comes from storyboards that have been drawn up, especially with a film that's been, that's just finished principal photography. But no, nothing of note has been. From my airwaves anyway, nothing of note has come about since obviously the Force Awakens title had been released. So
Yeah. Yeah, there's not been too much because it's basically wrapped and obviously it's going into the editing room to add in all those Gungans. So
yeah,
apart
the huge sort of like massacre of Gungans and Ewoks. Hopefully.
yeah, and Yogi's been away for a few weeks, like we said. The force was not strong with the broadband in his house, so we have him back.
Don't
How's
remind
it
me.
going,
It's
Yogi?
terrible.
How you been though?
I've been good, and I'm definitely convinced that that Comcast is the Sith.
Yeah.
Sheev Palpatine himself. That's what I learned. Yeah, that's his official first name is Sheev Palpatine, Sheev. So there you go. Crazy name. I can't believe that's official, but yes, it's Sheev Palpatine is the Emperor himself. So maybe that's Comcast's CEO is Sheev.
I don't doubt it. And, Palpatine is a pretty terrible name too. If you think about it, it sounds almost like palm. So you think about Palpatine as like face palm or heavy masturbation to the point of calluses. I don't know. There's something there.
Wow. Yeah, it's like palming something to a pulp.
They
Yeah.
we should make it into a verb. Yeah.
Yeah.
Stop Palpatining me, man.
Back off, bro, Palpatine ya.
Oh man.
Oh dear. So anyway, we had a lovely episode out of darkness. And Ross, do you want to give us a brief rundown?
Yeah, Out of Darkness was it was an interesting episode, obviously coming off the back of Breaking Ranks, which you would have heard us talk about last week if you've been listening in, and off the back of that, we finally got another sort of duo-centric episodes. Obviously, the first one being Fight or Flight. Uh, in Out of Darkness, we sort of get a chance to sort of see Hera and Sabine, who haven't really been focused too much on so far in the previous four episodes. And obviously, Out of Darkness, Sabine sort of throws her teenage drop and demands to know more information as to why they're doing certain things, which then leads them to bringing Sabine on as they drop and collect their sort of reward from a mysterious voice called Fulcrum. And yeah, so technically, yeah, so that's basically it. And then they get stranded due to the tomfoolery previously done by Ezra and Zeb, and we get to see some kick-ass heroines this time rather than heroes. And it certainly was a strong episode overall, and there was quite a lot of hints to the Clone Wars as well in the background. If anyone had a eagle eye, yeah, that's Out of Darkness. So, what about yourselves? How did you find the episode? Any pros, cons?
I'll pass over to Yogi since he's been silent due to the lack of broadband in his sector.
I've been with you guys in spirit. I tried to project my astral spirit at you, use my Jedi powers, but I guess it failed. But
Yeah, Force just wasn't strong enough. I don't think.
it wasn't. It wasn't. But I watched the episode twice, and I was gonna watch it the third time. I enjoyed it, but something about it, like it felt like it wasn't one of the stronger episodes. I don't know why. I kind of put it. It's not as bad as the whole fruit episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like that episode, I want to talk to you guys about it, but was that episode 2, was it, where they went for the fruit, or 3?
Yeah, that was episode 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I feel like this was a similar episode where the plot itself wasn't that necessary, that pivotal, that critical to the overall storytelling, but it did serve the purpose of providing some characterization. So that part I appreciated, but it felt, I don't know, it felt a little anticlimactic to me for some reason. I don't know. Maybe I'm just in the mood. Maybe I'm just being a bitch.
Well, I can understand where you're coming from, and I put it down to maybe the fact that the threat that they were dealing with didn't look that dangerous. They were almost as cuddly as the previous aliens that we'd seen.
Yeah.
In Rise of the Old Masters, when Hera was like sort of hiding with a ship, and then the aliens decided to to get some funky business down and
Let's
get
get
down
it
and
on.
I think they just looked a wee bit too cute and cuddly with sort of sharp teeth. They didn't really look as as
They were
sort of
like
dangerous as I expected.
they're like Furbies, Remember Furbies?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
Furbies are
hairless
scary, but
Furbies.
at first you're like, yo, you're kind of cute. All right, you're gonna kill me, but you're still cute.
Yeah, that's what I attribute it to. I reckon like that certainly was the weakest thing, was the threat just didn't feel as well, the monsters didn't feel as threatening as they really should have been, which kind of made their entire sort of like almost like last stand a bit sort of pointless sort of idea. And it was a bit kind of, yeah, I suppose like with the negatives that could be a way. It felt kind of some of the dialogue and some of the action felt a bit forced, in the sense that it was almost as if they had to find an excuse to introduce this fulcrum, which sort of ties in the overall, like almost probably the season story arc. And they were kind of like, shit, we better just, shove this episode in so at least we can get the ball rolling, rather than, having a decent plan to maybe slowly bring them in. But
See,
Yeah.
that wasn't my problem with the episode though. Like my episode was the whole forced. So like I know I said last week that I really wanted to see more Hera and Sabine, but should have been more specific. I want to see more about Sabine's background, which I'm sure we'll get. But these sort of buddy up episodes, like
Yeah.
the one Yogi was talking about, where Zeb and Ezra went after the fruit, and it felt like Aladdin, Aladdin Wars. This one felt almost. These ones feel too forced. If they're not doing things as a team and they're doing them as two, I know they might eventually phase out, because obviously this is us getting to see the team bonding and stuff. I get it, but it felt a bit too forced. However, the Volcrum stuff, I enjoyed the wee sort of tease. I wasn't as Ross told me last week when we were watching it that he wasn't best impressed with the way it happened, but I thought it was cool. And I wanted to ask you two guys, do you have any theories of who Volcrum might be? I have one.
I've got two totally, but I've got a normal one, and then I always have like an outlandish theory. My normal one is that I think it's just going to be bog standard, like either like Wedge Antilles or Bail Organa, and it's going to be one of those, and it's going to be their contact into the rebellion. And as the season goes on, there's going to get more high risk jobs that they're going to have to take. It's going to get them introduced into certain places and certain people. My outlandish theory is that it could be Ahsoka Tano. That'd be hilarious if it was Ahsoka Tano.
That would be good.
And And basically it would be like that'd be a nice sort of like tie-in with the Clone Wars, and we could try and maybe finally get her character a satisfying conclusion, whether or not she sort of sacrifices herself as fulcrum in order to keep the ship Ghost and their crew alive, to continue the good work of the rebellion or something along those lines. Because it was a voice changer that was used from Fulcrum, so it doesn't necessarily need to be male. The person, it could be female. So they're my two theories.
Yogi, who do you reckon it could be? Who do you think's the one pulling the strings of the rebellion?
I would love the female twist. That'd be great. Something unexpected. I was thinking about guys. I'm terrible with names. What's the one senator they already introduced? In the show.
Is it Bail Organa?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Princess Leia's dad.
Yeah, Princess Leia's dad. There you go. So
stepdad.
So yeah, I'm thinking that right there.
Yeah, that was my logical option. I had an outlandish one like Ross. You can tell we're related. My main one is obviously Bail Organa. Seems the logic way to go, because he seems the strongest sort of figure that we know so far in the Star Wars universe. I like Ross's theory. It could be Ahsoka, like putting on the voice. But my outlandish theory, Ross, was, and it's going back to the Force Unleashed. It's it's either Vader or Galen Marek.
Oh my God! Will you just let the Force Unleashed go, Alistair? Please.
No.
It's not gonna happen.
No. It could happen.
No, because it's the worst way how the rebellion came about. It's Darth Vader's plan all along.
Yep.
No, it's idiotic.
Okay.
I'm glad I never finished those games. They were really good games, but now that they said for sure that they're not canon, it's like I'm glad I didn't tease myself, because that would piss me off. I hate that.
I like the first one. Game. I would call them more
one.
QuickTime events, like overly long QuickTime events.
No, to be honest, it was the first game that you ever felt as badass as you wanted to when you imagined yourself as a Jedi. Like the first game certainly was brilliant. The second game, it was kind of rushed through production and it wasn't as good. And I like the character Galen Marek, and obviously the guy, what's his name? Is it Sam Witwer or something? Sam Witwer. He actually played Darth Maul in the Clone Wars, so he's still tied to Star Wars, and he still loves the character. So who knows, Ross? Who knows?
That's like me turning and going, yeah, Falcon's going to be Kyle Katarn. You know, that's like...
It could be. Good thinking.
But no, the female side of things would be quite cool. You know, at first I thought Princess Leia, but I realized age-wise she would be the same age as Ezra at this point, because I believe so.
Yeah, she would be 14. I think we worked out. Luke would be 14 at this point. So yeah, roughly about Ezra's age, maybe slightly older, but no, it won't be Leia. Although Leia obviously that's what I mean. This is why it makes sense as Bail Organa, because obviously in Episode 4, A New Hope, we see Princess Leia sending the message to R2-D2, so she knows about the rebellion, so it would make sense that her father, if he's not one of the first to jump on, as he was in The Force Unleashed, like it or love it, like it or hate it, he was one of the first, and it would make sense that he started it, because it just suits his character, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's a whole lot of other theories. A couple of other sort of listeners, they've also suggested to me face to face. They've said that it could be Lando Calrissian was one, because he is due to make an appearance. Billy D. Williams has confirmed that he's voiced parts for Star Wars Rebels, so we're definitely going to see Lando at some point in season 1.
Really?
Yeah, Lando.
After all this time?
Yeah.
Well, do you want to know? I actually found something that was interesting, Yogi, that I shared with Ross after last week's show. I was looking up. I actually went shopping last week's show during the show for figures, and I found the Millennium Falcon, a new edition of it that's branded Rebels, saying act out your favourite Rebels scenes with the Millennium Falcon. So it might be, as Ross was hoping, we get to see Lando when he owned the Millennium Falcon.
Yeah, Billy D. Williams has confirmed, I think via his Twitter account or an interview, that he has met up with the Rebels team and put his voice towards the show. So he could. So a lot of people say that could be Fulcrum. Another person also noted that in Rise of the Old Masters we saw exiled senator, I think it was, who was coming out with sort of pirated broadcasts, basically sort of explaining to people, you know, to not go against to go against the Empire, and to not, you know, to not be deceived by them. And he sort of like interrupts our Imperial broadcasting, gets immediately shut off. Some people it could be this person. We don't know his name. Well, I think we do know his name, but I can't remember it off by hand. So people it could be this exile senator. However, I reckon this Exile Center is a ploy by the Emperor to sort of like draw out the rebels into, every time he seems to come about, there seems to be some sort of trap that's been created. So I reckon he could be like a red herring for
It's a
everyone.
trap.
But
It's a
but
trap.
the Lando thing would be intriguing if it does turn out that he is Fulcrum as well. Would be quite cool. But I've probably siding with Yogi here. A female twist to it would probably be more satisfying. I reckon.
Yeah, Ahsoka would be cool.
Playing. Maybe not Ahsoka, but it could be Mon Mothma or somebody. Be interesting to
Or
see.
it could be General Akbar.
It's a trap.
It's a trap.
That'd be brilliant.
That would be really good, actually. Yeah. So, overall, this episode, I did enjoy. I enjoy all the episodes. Even if they're not strong in the ways of the Star Wars storyline, like they're not in depth. We've got to remember they are based for a younger audience. But overall, I've not had one that I didn't enjoy all the way through. Everyone's got certain parts, and of course, most of us guys would love just to get into the Kanan and Ezra and them training Padawan and Master side by Padawan and not even Jedi Knight training Padawan and Padawan technically side by side. Um, I'm okay with this episode. It wasn't the best, but yeah, I don't know how else they could do it though. Like, there's very little way to make the team bond without doing this in the time they've got. Like Ross pointed out in a previous episode, they could do with a bit longer in each episode, I think.
Yeah, it certainly does feel rushed, and I mean, but they're certainly planting the seeds correctly. Specifically, obviously Sabine's background, we've sort of finally figured out that she's from Mandalore, and she used to be in the Imperial Academy until she sort of got disillusioned by some form or the other, and decided to join the crew of Ghost. So we already sort of have an intriguing background, which we kind of hope to explore, and it's almost as if like it's raising more questions than answering them right now, which is great on one side because it's giving us a lot more content to look forward to as season 1 and obviously season 2 that's been announced will continue. But it's negative in the sense that you kind of want to know what's going on right there, right now. For me personally, being the impatient guy that I am, especially with sort of Sabine's background, considering that obviously we'll be discussing Hera's, even through the book A New Dawn. We don't know a lot about Hera's background either. We're now getting a glimpse of Sabine's, especially considering how she's also already been in the Imperial Academy. Could she be an informant for the Imperials? Is she a spy or a mole within Ghost? You never know.
Oh,
But there's a lot of things I've thrown up and a lot of questions going on. How did she escape from the Academy? Or why did she escape from the Academy? Like things like that. I've definitely been raised just via the 20 minutes that was Out of Darkness. So hopefully it's not one of those things where they just sort of like forget about it later on, but they do get answered maybe in the next handful of episodes.
I've got another name to throw in the barrel. And this isn't a ridiculous one, actually. It's one of my favourite sort of almost Z-list characters, but I own 4 different figures of him. Quinlan Vos, who trained alongside Obi-Wan.
Well, he isn't he? He's been confirmed as of the novel that's
Clone
coming
Wars.
out next year,
And
he's
Clone
in the
Wars.
Clone Wars, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, so it could be him.
It'd be interesting to see how. But there is a book coming out with him next year with Asajj
And
Ventress. So.
Asajj Ventress, yeah, that's right. So, but that's what I mean, like next year. So we could find Fulcrum's identity at the end of this season, and it could turn out to be Quinlan leading into the book. And also, we've also got once this first season finishes, Marvel Comics have now got the license off of Dark Horse for the Star Wars as of next year, and not the Star Wars, and they are starting off with The Last Padawan, Kanan. That book is going to be awesome, I think. And I hope it starts pre-Order 66.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that goes on. But bringing it back to like the whole Fulcrum thing, again, don't you think that if it was another Jedi, and again, this is me sort of like contradicting my theory of Ahsoka Tano, don't you think that contradicts if another Jedi was involved in the rebellion like that, ingrained? Don't you think that name should have been brought up in episodes 4 to 6? Like, how there's that whole idea that, like Yoda, Obi-Wan, and Luke are like the remaining Jedi. Surely, like surely the rebels should have like flagged up, going, "Oh yeah, there's also these other Jedi's that helped us out." So it could. That's why maybe Fulcrum may or may not be. That could be like the negative side to like Ahsoka or Quinlan Vos, is the fact that maybe it's bringing these sort of Jedi's too close to the rebellion to the point where people would then raise questions as to why they weren't even referenced in 4 to 6. So, but that also
Yeah.
brings up how will the crew of Ghosts be involved with the rebellion if that was the case? Maybe does Kanan just not bother telling the rebellion who he actually is? It could go that way as well.
Yeah.
So
Well,
again, it's
true.
very intriguing, and Out of Darkness certainly has sort of raised a lot more questions for the overall plot story. I think it's more because we've now had a chance to sort of get our feet into the animation, get our feet into the storyline. We now know who each person is. We kind of know what they're dealing with and why they're there. And now we get to focus on sort of the overall season arc. So
Yeah. I'm really enjoying it. What about you guys? Are you enjoying the season so far, or are you thinking it's lacking something? Is there something you want to see?
I'm loving it. I think from what it feels like, you know, I feel they're pacing it to set up for at least a good 3 or 4 season run. I don't know how many episodes they've ordered so far or whatever, but it feels like the pacing is set up for a nice long run because, I don't want to say some of these episodes are filler, but there's some stuff in there that's fun, but it doesn't really add that much to it. Now, even this episode, Out of the Darkness, I felt it was a little weaker, but you guys did say make some good points about how it did raise the right questions. It gave us some really good takeaways, knowing that Sabine was in Imperial Academy. So you start to wonder if you really look at it, like was she pressing Hera hard to get some information to bring back to her contacts? Is she a mole, or is she just genuinely trying to get a fresh start? Like maybe she has some trust issues. Maybe she feels like she's not wanted because she doesn't like the whole secrecy thing. Maybe it's just genuinely that. Like hey, throw me a bone. I want to feel like I'm a real part of the team. So I don't know. I kind of want to lean towards the fact that she's not a mole. She just wants to feel more involved, and she wants to build that trust. I think that's important to her because she seems too soft unless she puts on a real good act. I mean, she is a woman, so that's a little scary.
I mean, yeah, I liked how Sabine sort of came into her own in the sense that we finally see she's like the bridge between the sort of like the more mature leaders of like in Hera and Kanan, and with the sort of the immaturity of
Chopper.
Ezra and Chopper and Zeb.
Yeah.
Like Sabine seems to be in that sort of bridge position
Yeah.
within the crew. So obviously, she could be going through her own characterization where, she still wants to be sort of part of everything. And, we could end up seeing her having to either sticking with the immaturity of Ezra and Zeb or moving into a more larger role. And hopefully the fact that she's sort of throwing these questions and pushing that, she could sort of become a stronger character rather than this sort of whiny teenage person that we see just now. But,
Yeah, I do agree. I would like the focus a lot more. I don't think we're going to get. I think this series, a bit like the book that we're going to cover in a little bit, is going to stay away from Jedi as much as possible. Whereas Clone Wars was every episode had many lightsaber battles. Every problem was solved with a lightsaber. Whereas this is the complete opposite. It's more getting you to know the characters and stuff before getting too in depth. And I'd really want to see more of that Inquisitor.
Yeah, the Inquisitor's quite badass, I must say. Yeah, but I like how they're not focusing on Jedi lightsabers and the Force that much because, we're delving into an area of Star Wars, not just like era wise, but like character wise, where there isn't a lot of the Force and the lightsaber, so we're getting to see that other side of the galaxy of people using blasters, people using cunning and wit to sort of get their way around, and people that may or may not play, and I bring this up every episode, but people who may or may not play Edge of the Empire, the Fantasy Flight role-playing game, they'll sort of understand that it's a brilliant kind of sort of comparison in the sense that these characters you see in Star Wars Rebels are ones that you can pretty much make and see in Edge of the Empire because it doesn't focus on the Force and lightsabers at all, and it's a brilliant sort of it's brilliant to see the other side of the coin through this group. But obviously you still have the Force and the lightsabers, which makes the seeing the Force and seeing the lightsabers that much more special and unique. A bit like how the original trilogy, you didn't see a lot of the Force and the lightsabers being used, whereas the Clone Wars and the original trilogy not original, the prequel trilogy just went overboard. So it's bringing it back to the sort of, it makes those moments with a lightsaber and those moments with the Force special and unique, rather than
Yeah.
just getting it rammed down your throat every episode.
And it's kind of in tune with the original prequel, like you were saying. Like it's more fitting than Clone Wars, where the lightsabers were necessary because it was the middle of a war, and obviously the Jedi are meant to be in hiding. So if we seen Kanan using his lightsaber every 2 seconds, it just would not feel right. Eventually, I don't think.
Yeah, it wouldn't feel right, and then it would just raise the question as to why. It then sort of brings up kind of like, why is Luke considered such a rare specimen, because he's like one of the few Jedi's left, or one of the few known Jedi's left. If Kanan was kicking about, chopping things left, right, and center with his lightsaber, but using it only when necessary, just brings that sort of specialness to those kind of scenes. So yeah, it's an interesting sort of way to push it through. And Out of Darkness really kind of showed you that, where the sense that it really sort of like enhanced that idea, because the two characters, Sabine and Hera, were just blasters only, and they had to use their guile to set up the explosive barrels in order to sort of like stave off the attack from the monsters. Whereas, and even when the ship came down, you didn't see Kanan run out of the ramp with his lightsaber to sort of chop up the monsters. You kind of saw everybody using their blasters and all that stuff, which again was brilliant. It was really, really good. So
See, as well with this episode, the one thing I'll be using it for is obviously once me and the wife have kids in the future, if they ever see my Vin Diesel collection of the Pitch Black movies and they want to watch it, I'm going to stick this on and go, that's basically it.
yeah, that pretty much. Well, yeah, they pretty much did kind of take Pitch Black and just Disney-fy Pitch Black successfully, almost.
Yeah, they did. Possibly even better at some points, I would say.
It certainly was. Yeah, they managed to condense Pitch Black into 20 minutes.
I'm going to throw a name out there, and I won't say why, because it might ruin some. We're going to do a segment on A New Dawn. We're going to cover that. And obviously Yogi hasn't read it yet. But Ross, this name here kind of came to my head there when I was looking at my notes for A New Dawn. What if Zaluna was Fulcrum?
Zaluna? Now, that name should ring a bell, but
She was the wee agent.
Oh yeah,
spy.
yeah. No, I don't think so. Purely because of the ending of A New Dawn, definitely not. So, no, I don't think it would be her from A New Dawn. Definitely.
Okay, so we'll move on to A New Dawn. Now, this book is written by the wonderful John Jackson Miller, as he's otherwise known to his friends. He is the person that has wrote the final expanded universe novel, the ODU, the Legends series as it's known as now, Kenobi. That was the last book that came out, and we're talking novels here. And he's also wrote the first book, which was A New Dawn. Now, Kenobi was brilliant because I love Obi-Wan Kenobi. It's a shame that it's not canon anymore, but it makes sense because an Obi-Wan Kenobi movie, which to me is a no-brainer, is bound to show up within the next 2 or 3 years because they're doing a filler film in between the episodes, as far as I know. Mm-hmm. So it's a shame it didn't, because Kenobi was it was fantastic. A New Dawn, however, I ordered it hardback, pre-ordered it. I've pre-ordered them all. And, well, I'm getting Tarkin for Christmas, I think. I might get it before. And then, obviously, we've got the Heir to the Jedi and
Lords of the
Sith, which, like we said last week, sounds like Darth and Palpatine on a road trip.
It totally is. It's like Hangover in the Star Wars universe.
You thought you'd seen it all. Wait till you see this year's. It seems silly, but it's going to be interesting. But anyway, back to A New Dawn. This book is one of the easiest reading, and I don't mean aimed at children. This is quite clearly an adult, or at least from 20s up, book to read, because there's some nudge, wink, wink moments. It's easier to read. I'm purely saying that based on previous expanded universe novels that I have read that are heavily based on facts, planet positions, names from previous books that you may or may not know. If you've never read an expanded universe book, this is the one to pick up, because one, it's the first canon novel, and two, it doesn't refer to anything that you have not seen in the movies or the TV series. And when it does refer to the Clone Wars, it doesn't do it heavily either. It's more as long as you've seen Attack of the Clones, you'll know what he's talking about because you're aware of the Clone Wars. So, it starts out really well, and I'm going to pass over to Ross for his description of the book because I've got a few. There's some pluses and minuses in this book, but mostly it's pluses. Ross.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, A New Dawn. It kind of it sets up the backstory of Kanan and Hera. It's kind of it fleshes them out a little bit more. It doesn't give you it's difficult to understand. It's kind of like you get more of an idea as to who the characters are, but you don't know like why they've come to be. You know, when I say they fleshed them out, you don't know exactly what Hera's been up to. You don't know like, you know, from when she grew up or like, you know, why she's doing like you don't find out her motives behind what she's doing when Rebel starts. But you do find a wee bit more about Kanan's background, about you know, like what happened to him, and you get a fair idea as to like how he managed to survive since the Jedi Purge up to the point in the book, which I think is set. Is it 5 years before Rebels, or is it?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it's 5 years before. Yeah,
So
we'll go
yeah.
with
So
that.
basically, like Hera and Kanan, they sort of encounter each other on this sort of like backwater planet called Gorse, and Hera's kind of gathering intel on the mining operations that are happening on the planet. And Kanan is just so happens works as a miner, keeping himself to himself. He kind of is referenced as he's basically an alcoholic that
Yep.
lives on top, lives above a cantina, works there part time as well as shipping.
It says works, but then it describes that he helps himself to the bar while he's working.
Yeah, he helps to the bar. He pretty much bounces in this cantina, and that's what it brings
He's
in
like
sort of
Ross when he goes back home.
yeah, pretty much. Or whenever I find a new bar that let me in for more than 2 weeks. But yeah, so basically, it kind of it just highlights the adult themes behind the characters Kanan and Hera, because obviously when we're watching Rebels, it's Disney-fied, it's aimed at kids, but we know Kanan and Hera are adults, so you know it doesn't take a genius to know that you know that they're not all going to be you know goody two shoes people. So we get to see the it's almost like the adult version of Rebels. You know, you get to see the sort of like the sexual tension between Hera and Kanan, but you also get to see how Kanan is a bit of an arsehole, a bit of an arrogant prick as well.
Yep.
But it's written well, you know, there's reasons behind why he's an arrogant prick, and obviously being the fact that he's like lost his identity, doesn't know who he is, and Hera sort of intrigues him to the point where he sort of ends up chasing after her, and then they end up sort of getting together, not in a romantic way, but getting to like teaming up in order to try and save Gorse from the crazy destruction that's planned by. It sounds like pretty much a knockoff General Grievous is
Yeah,
basically
that's how I pictured them in my head.
yeah.
Count Vidian.
Yeah, Count Vidian. He's pretty much General Grievous in terms of like how he looks, and his plan. He has to keep up with the targets that the Emperor's setting, and in order for him to do that, he's going to destroy a moon, which is it's a nice foreshadowing towards what the Death Star can do, I suppose. And they're basically trying to blow up this entire moon, and it's up to Hera and Kanan to stop them. And yeah, it's an interesting book, and it brings up various themes and plot points that Disney would be not too scared, but Disney would have no interest in trying to explain via the Rebels cartoon. Obviously, more specifically, you know, the attitude that Kanan has, and you know, the sort of the hardships that he's gone through since the Jedi Purge, and you know what he's been up to, and that whole sort of idea that he's a womanizer and a sort of a womanizer and an alcoholic, basically. Hera, however, she's not fleshed out as well as expected. She's still got an air of mystery around her, which definitely intrigued me as a reader to keep me reading on. But now knowing Rebels, I was kind of hoping that maybe a wee bit more of her backstory would have had some light shed on. But I believe A New Dawn was released though before Rebels started. Am I correct?
Yes.
So
It's a prequel.
it kind of makes sense. If the book was released before Rebels came out, you know, people would know a wee bit more about Hera, which would then take away the air of mystery that the cartoon obviously was trying to sort of set up about Hera. But yeah, that was probably my only downside. But it's a great read, and as Alistair pointed out earlier on, for people that have not read an expanded universe novel before, or are trying to sort of work the way through the swamp that is the Legends expanded universe now, A New Dawn's a brilliant way to start. You know, it's the first in a long line of books that'll be planned, and yeah, it's brilliant. Like, I kind of the way Kanan as well is obviously written is a bit written like uh, the Firefly main character. Why can I not remember his name?
Captain
Mal.
Yes,
Mal.
Mal. Thank you, Yogi. I can't believe I've forgotten that. I'm gonna just sign off now. But
And you
in
call
shame-
yourself a brown coat.
I know I'm gonna sign off and shame. But yes, Captain Mal. That's what Kanan is kind of like in the book. Like he's written that way. It does have an air of Firefly in the book, which obviously you don't really get that idea on the Rebels cartoon. So if you want to get sort of the adult thing, and after you read A New Dawn and you watch Rebels again, you do sort of pick up on the subtleties that possibly the animators and the writers have left in there for the adult viewers, which makes you like, ah, yeah, those little hints and the way that Hera and Kanan interact kind of has a bit more depth to it now after reading A New Dawn.
Yeah. My favorite part of the book was Count Vidian. He was made a bad guy that we've not seen since Darth Vader before you knew about his backstory and felt a wee bit sorry for him. This was a man to be hated, that he was on his deathbed, got cyborg implants basically and created himself. Like General Grievous is a cyborg as well, he's not a robot, and most of his body's covered. He's just evil. He's done things like falsified documents. He's even manipulated the Emperor to a certain extent. He's just diabolical. That's the best word to describe him. And near the end of the book, you even find out last pieces of information about Count Vidian as well that make you hate him even more. There's nothing likable about him, and that's a good thing. Kanan, I love the way he was portrayed. I second Ross's Captain Malcolm remark, but I also would like to throw in Chris Pratt's rendition of Star-Lord kind of came to mind when I was reading him.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, that cockiness around Kanan. And what's great though about it is the fact that Kanan in the book is read off as like a cocky, sarcastic, alcoholic womanizer. So
Yep.
obviously this book is set a few years before Rebels begins. So it's interesting to see how he's sort of matured to the point where obviously now being in charge of, not in charge of the ghost ship, but being in charge of the crew, it's obviously he's had to step up in his own maturity. So it was interesting to see Kanan, in a sort of younger, cocky self, and now seeing him this older, almost wiser self in Rebels. Now that he has obviously Ezra, and then there's Zeb and Sabine, that are in the crew. But yeah, I see where you're coming from that Chris Pratt side of things.
Yeah, it's 6 years. Sorry, I've just read here. It's 6 years before A New Dawn. I'm just reading that off of the Star Wars wiki for A New Dawn. I have just finished the book as well. I took all week reading it at work as much as I could. And I'll probably reread this again. I'm glad I've got this book in hardback. I do understand why they didn't show you much about Hera or Kanan's backstory, because obviously we're having Kanan, the last Padawan, the comic, which is going to probably cover that, and obviously Hera's backstory might be a secret, like you said. Could she be a spy? Could she be a sleeper agent? Who knows what her backstory actually is. The one thing that I was hoping it would branch at least to, which obviously there's still scope, there's still enough years between. I really hope we got another one, an intermediate novel between Rebels and A New Dawn that covers them meeting Zeb and Sabine and how they came to them. But that'll depend on whether Rebels, the shows, kind of get dibs on them to cover on TV. Apart from that, like I said, the book is not a hard read. It's not too simple that it's a childlike novel, but it's not too difficult that you're like, what is this? Who is this? I did have to Google a couple of times. The guy whose wife get thrown in the acid pit.
Yes, the basilisk. Yep.
I didn't realize what species that was, so I had to Google that. And he's the same as Obi-Wan's pal, the cook.
Yes,
The
yeah, the
chef.
four-armed guy. I mean, like
Yeah.
what you've just brought up there, you don't need to know the species and the planets to still
No.
enjoy the book. It adds a bit more sort of depth to your reading experience if you do sort of do the quick research or you kind of know, but it's not vital. I mean, yeah, Miller's really sort of stepped it up, and it's a great introduction to the new expanded universe. his pacing and the way it's written is definitely feels like a classic Star Wars story as well.
Oh
And
yes.
yeah, it really is. I was highly impressed with it. And if this is going to be the quality that this new expanded universe books is going to be like seeking out,
Well,
then
they're no longer
that's
expanded universe. They're now official
yeah,
canon. This
canon,
happened.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's so if this is the quality that they're going to be seeking out for these sort of for these novels, then I have high hopes for the rest of the novels
Yeah.
forthcoming. So
And there was a couple other characters that we're going to cover, and one of them, what was his name? Kelly. It wasn't Skelly.
yep.
Skelly. He actually showed you the way that they're actually treating the Clone Wars veterans, and it's not very nice. They're kind of shipping them to retirement homes and kind of brushing them aside.
Yeah, it was an interesting look into that side of things. Like in the Clone Wars, you sort of got to see the glorified war, and you got to see them in action. Whereas we're now in that era of the Star Wars galaxy or the Star Wars universe, where like what would happen to the non-clones that served in the Clone Wars? Like fair dues, the bulk of the army were clones, but there were still actual like humans and other species that served in the Clone Wars, and you got to sort of see an idea as to how it's done. And it's I don't know, it could be an analogy towards maybe how veterans are treated in our society, in the sense that they are just sort of like, well, in
Yeah.
a new dawn, they are sort of shunned and they're put away, and they're not really given a lot of support from the government, and i.e. the empire. So it was an interesting look into like what happens after the aftermath of this war, and which was 10 years in terms of how where a new dawn sits in the timeline. So yeah, Skelly obviously was a demolitions expert in the Clone Wars, and he brings his expertise to this mining community. And yeah, there's quite a lot of resentment with how he was treated by the Empire and so on and so forth. But it was quite interesting to know that he wasn't a clone; he was just
Yeah.
a normal human being, which also highlighted the fact that yeah, it was called the Clone Wars, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it was just clones versus droids. There were other people affected.
It also showed us that the Clone Wars were actually kept going for so long because the Empire controlled obviously the droid creating factories and the clone producing factories. So there was big money in the Clone Wars, we heard in this book, which is a kind of relatively new subject for, well, official Star Wars canon, which this is all now official. It's kind of like untapped territory, like talking about the politics of, well, excuse episode one's politics, but I mean the real politics of the Clone Wars. It was all monetary based. Like basically, the Emperor had a finger in every pie, and like people know about it. Whereas because we seen the Clone Wars, like you've got to remember, like I forgot about this, Ross. The Clone Wars, us as viewers, seen it through Obi-Wan and Anakin's eyes. Basically, we didn't see the fringe worlds. We didn't see Skelly fighting. We didn't see like humans defending the world against the Emperor trying to invade. Even in the final days of the Clone Wars, where the Emperor was trying to enforce himself in places, we did not see that yet. We might still see it, but it would be an interesting time period to see like the initial rebellions against the Empire, and Disney would never show it though, actually, because that would just be a massacre in my head.
Well, you've got to remember though, like it was the separatists that they were against. So technically, this empire was just an offshoot of the
Yeah,
Victorious
true.
Republic.
Sorry.
So
Yep.
I know I see we're coming from the fact that yeah, the emperor is trying to like force himself into these outlying territories. But what you have to remember is like seeing the outer rim with planets like Gorse, Tatooine, and all that. They were separatist. They were separatist planets, so they were already shunned and just stripped of their resources anyway by the Empire, which is rebranded, well, by the Republic rebranded as the Empire. But still, though, it still shows that sort of like yeah, Skelly does highlight probably the resentment that a lot of people are, and there certainly was some sort of seeds laid about the fear that a lot of the general population are beginning to have with the Empire, which was obviously enhanced with another character called Zaluna, who was an imperial sort of
She
what
was a
would you call them?
Celestin. She was
Well, no, no, no,
a.
no, no, not the species. Like her job was
She was like a surveillance
yeah, she was like an
technologist
Empire
sort of thing.
surveillance employee, where she would listen in, and anybody, but she would hear snippets of conversations and immediately flag the authorities. And
Yep.
then she realizes that the snippets of conversations weren't the full conversation and sometimes taken out of context, and that's when you sort of realize that the Empire isn't looking out for the general population. So ruling through fear rather than force type idea. But no, overall, it certainly was a
That
highlighted.
makes complete sense. Fear rather than using the Force. Huh. See,
It was
whereas the Jedi used to be.
yeah.
Never mind. It was bad.
It's still though, overall, it certainly is it's worth the read, and especially if you want to see areas of the Empire that aren't necessarily highlighted within the cartoon Rebels and the original trilogy. It certainly just fleshes out the Empire and gives it that more of a sort of totalitarian state, and it really does highlight what it must be like to live under a dictatorship.
Yeah. The other one thing before we finish up was I did like the part. It was kind of interesting to me that Order 66 was, as Ross told me earlier this week, whereas I thought it was up to the clones. It was an embedded, almost sleeper command to them that they had to exterminate the Jedi. Now, the stormtroopers we've already seen, the clones are not used as stormtroopers. It is human beings that are trained as younger. Now, there's obviously some sort of brainwashing that goes on, but at the end, there's a certain command from an Imperial officer that turns around and says, "On by the name of the Empire, by the name of the Emperor, on or behalf of something," and without hesitation, the stormtroopers that aren't even clones obey that order to the T. Ross, were you
Yeah,
surprised at that?
well, not really. I mean, like if I was a stormtrooper and I got told that it was the Emperor's order for me to arrest Count Vidian, I would bloody well do it rather than face the wrath of the Emperor. That's. I think it was just
True.
that way where it was to highlight the fact that although Vidian had his own sort of regiment of stormtroopers with him, they were still Imperial stormtroopers. So their orders, especially if it was phrased in a way that the Emperor has ordered you to do that, they would bloody well do it, even if Count Vidian was technically, de facto in charge of them. Yeah, that's pretty. I don't think there would be any underlying sort of, hidden
No.
chips or anything to that. No, no, no. I think that's just a blatant, it's a bit like, if a supervisor told me to stack shelves one way, but then the manager of the shop told me to stack the other way, I would go with the manager's order rather than the supervisor's order. That's kind of the way I perceived or took that scene towards the end.
I was kind of surprised. I did like certain parts that, like we were talking about pre-show, Ross, that they downplayed, as Rebels does as well. They downplayed the whole Jedi side. Like Kanan actually hid it completely. It was points where we wanted him to use his lightsaber, and he reached for it and then stopped himself. He did use the Force at one point, and it made more of an impact reading it than if he used his lightsaber to chop up everyone.
Yeah, I believe it was well written in the sense that it was more the Force wasn't really described as the Force. It was more described as a sort of like a athletic feat in the heat of the moment. There was like two instances where he used the Force. One where it was written in a way where it was a bit like, if people had like pumped up with adrenaline, you hear about those stories where like, mums lifting cars to save their kids. It was written in that kind of way, but obviously knowing he was a Jedi, you knew it was a Force, but it was Miller tackled it quite subtly and made it out as kind of going, was it the Force or was it just this, like crazy unique feat? Until of course at the end when you do realize he used the Force to save Hera. But yeah, it certainly was well written and it was well balanced in sense. So you weren't constantly. Kanan wasn't constantly relying on the Force and wasn't constantly relying on using his lightsaber. So we got to see the other scoundrel part of Kanan instead, which this era of Star Wars is all about. It's all about the smugglers, scoundrels, the non-Jedi Force users. So it was brilliant to see that they could still write a successful Star Wars book with limited use of the Force.
Or as Obi-Wan called these times, the dark times.
Yeah.
That was a terrible Alec McGuinness impression, but yeah. No, I'm interested to see, like you were saying before, how these stories delve in. And to be honest, right now, I'm kind of hoping that most of the story, I'm not sure about Tarkin, Ross, I know you've started that, but I'm hoping that most of them focus on between episodes 3 and 4, and then next year we see the shift between like episodes 6 and 7. I would really like to see that, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, Tarkin's set 5 years after the Clone Wars is finished,
good.
so it's like right in there, and it's so far it's absolutely brilliant. So
Yeah.
if you finish reading if you're listening to this and you finish reading A New Dawn, get straight into Tarkin. It's out already and it's brilliant. And if you don't know who Tarkin is, watch A New Hope and you'll understand.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like, Tarkin's one of these guys that like even Vader answers to, and it's like, why does Vader answer to this man? Like, how did he get himself in this position? So
Well, you find out in this book, which is
yeah,
brilliant.
we're going to be covering it in a few weeks' time, probably next month. We'll give a month between the books, or maybe even 2 months, depending, because it's coming up to Christmas. But yeah, for Out of Darkness, they had the planet with the kind of half light and half not, or the sunshine, whereas this had the planet Gorse, which I believe is a brand new planet. Like half of it was covered in darkness.
Yes, half of it was. Yeah, it was tidally locked, and where so half the planet was intense heat, and the other half was just complete and utter darkness. Yeah, which is quite an interesting analogy, I suppose you could bring out with the fact that light side, dark side of the force, and if you're really looking into trying to pick out these things when you're sort of like reviewing and looking at a novel, is that an analogy of the light side, dark side? Could be, but it's interesting now to see one asteroid that had that same effect, and now a planet to have that same effect. It's still interesting.
Yeah, it was an excellent book and a good expansion. We're going to obviously have a review up on our website. But apart from that, unless you guys have got anything else you want to say, then I think we better get into hyperspeed and out of this zone.
I'm good.
Yogi?
Sabine is sexy. That's all I got to add. I'm sorry, guys.
Cool.
No, but you definitely sold me on a New Dawn. I need to read it sooner than later.
Is that voice of Sabine's? That's what it is. It's the voice, man.
No, we're not going back down there. That's a dark path you follow. Anyway, Ross, where can the people get us if they want to find us on Tinterwebs?
Yep, you can follow us on Twitter at RebelsCastUK. Hit us up with any questions or any opinions. Who do you think Fulcrum is? Let us know your batshit insane theories. We also have a website, rebelscast.co.uk, where myself and Ali will put up written reviews of each episode as well. Plus, we are going to be starting a wee mini holovid videos of various Star Wars memorabilia being unboxed. And you can also email us at starwarsrebelcast@gmail.com. So Twitter at rebelscastuk. Get us at the website, rebelcast.co.uk, and email starwarsrebelscast@gmail.com.
So thank you for that. Thank you, folks, for listening. Keep with us next week on Rebelscast UK, where we will be covering Empire Day and any Star Wars news that hits us from then. So, from myself, Yogi, and Ross, may the Force be with you.
Always.
Thanks, guys. Done.
Oh yeah.
Cool.